C6, C7, C8, T1. Upper, middle, lower trunks. You can see these two anterior divisions form the, lateral cord, which is broken off. All the three divisions posterior form the posterior cord. Here's the medial. You'll see them on this side, but you're missing some of the structures because the anterior scalene muscle, which has the phrenic nerve lying on top of it, is right there. So you see full lateral cord with anterior and anterior divisions, posterior division here and here forming posterior cord, anterior division forming medial cord here. Notice a very important thing. See how wide the spinal cord is here in the cervical region? When it gets down to cervical 4 and 5, what does it do? It widens out. That's called the cervical enlargement. Then when you get down below T1, what happens? The spinal cord gets narrower until we get down here to about T12, which is where the lumbar enlargements are going to start, down to here, because the cord ends at about L1 to L2. Okay? One concept you need to really understand is that the cord, which is the nervous tissue, is shorter than the column. Okay? The column is the bony stuff. The cord is the nervous tissue. Okay? Everybody got that? Cool. Recording me? Absolutely fine. If you record, do me a favor. Promise to share it with the rest of the class.
You got it.
Okay? C5, C6, C7, C8, T1. Upper trunk, middle trunk, lower trunk. Anterior division, lateral cord, posterior, 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 posterior cord, anterior division forming the medial cord here. Coming off of here is going to be the suprascapular nerve. Coming around here is the axillary nerve. Coming over here is the musculocutaneous nerve, which will then continue down into the forearm as the lateral antebrachial cutaneous nerve here. Okay? The ulnar nerve comes out here, goes by the medial epicondyle. If you palpate your medial epicondyle and come around, remember you had a little structure here, a little channel called the groove for the ulnar nerve? If you run your finger across that groove, you may get a twitch in your little finger. The ulnar nerve is the only nerve in the body that you can actually physically palpate because nerves generally run deep. Then the ulnar nerve will continue down into the forearm to innervate cutaneously the little finger and part of the ring finger. The median nerve comes here from the wishbone of the Y right here, does not innervate anything in the arm. As it crosses the elbow joint, it gives off this little branch called anterior interosseous, which we'll talk about later. Median nerve continues down here into the forearm, then will be cutaneous to the second half of the ring finger, as well as the rest of the anterior palm of the hand. The radial nerve is right here. It's coming around the back of the humerus, which is why you can't see it. It then comes around to the lateral epicondyle, gives off the deep radial and the superficial radial. This arm is in this position. This arm here is like this, okay? So you see in the palmar surface here, you're seeing the dorsum here. 5, 6, 7, 8, T1, suprascapular, axillary, musculocutaneous, but over here now is the radial, which comes around the back to be sensory to thumb, index, middle, and part of ring. The ulnar nerve comes here on the back of the hand to be sensory to part of the ring and your little finger there. Okay? Everybody good? Cool. It's hard to distinguish what's on the brachial plexus here, so no testing on that. Axillary artery is right here, okay? Here's your thumb. That's how you know you're on the lateral side. This is the lateral cord here. This is the medial cord here. You can't see the posterior because it's around the back here behind the axillary artery. But if you see here, it says AMR. You got 3 nerves coming off right here that are tucked in between the plexus and the muscles. This one here is the A. That's for axillary. Axillary comes around the back, pokes through here, innervates the teres minor over here, as well as the deltoid, which will be covering all this. Okay? This is the posterior scapular circumflex. This would be your quadrangular space. Okay? The second one down here is the musculocutaneous. Musculocutaneous we'll talk about next week. Innervates coracobrachialis, both heads of biceps, and brachialis. And it's also going to give off a little piece down here that I'll show you that becomes a lateral antebrachiocutaneous. Third one here, coming off the posterior cord, is the radial nerve, which pierces through the triceps. And the radial nerve, then I'm taking off the lateral head of the triceps here, because this is the long head, and here's the medial head. Here's your radial nerve in the radial groove running with the profunda brachii artery. Coming off of the radial nerve is this nerve, which is your posterior brachiocutaneous. This one, posterior antebrachiocutaneous, which will be sensory to the posterior forearm. Over here, you're going to have the median nerve, you're going to have the medial antebrachiocutaneous, and the ulnar. I'm going to take some more of this stuff. I'm going to go over these again as we go over the different compartments of the upper extremity. Ulnar nerve goes down the medial aspect of the forearm along with the ulnar artery to go into the hand and the back of the hand. Talk more about that later. Median nerve comes down here, doesn't innervate anything in the arm. It's going to innervate a bunch of muscles in the forearm, at the same time giving off this branch, which is the anterior interosseous, running with the anterior interosseous artery. Remember, you had the interosseous membrane between the 2 bones in the forearm. You got an anterior interosseous nerve and artery. You'll have a posterior interosseous nerve and artery. Over here is the radial artery, which is the easiest artery to take a pulse right here. And over here is the radial nerve, which dove deep here, comes around the lateral epicondyle, gives off the deep branch and the superficial branch, which will poke out here to innervate cutaneous sensation to the thumb, index, middle, lateral aspect of ring, where the dorsal ulnar cutaneous takes over, medial ring, and rest of little finger. Okay? Bump. Questions?
Would you do these ones again?
C5, 6, 7, 8, T1, upper, middle, lower trunks. We'll go over here. Anterior division, lateral cord, posterior division, posterior division, posterior division, posterior cord. This last anterior division forms the medial cord. Okay? All in relation to the axillary artery.